again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Pride, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
Just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Drunk Turkey Show. I'm Daniel, and today you just got me. Big Blue's got some things that he's going to be taking care of, so I'll be the only one today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and jumping on. If you're not already a subscriber, I'd appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, share the program. It'd be great. Today we're going to have 2 different topics that we're going to be talking about. First one is a couple of days ago when we had our last live. Myself and Big Blue had gotten a super chat in requesting that we look into the unsolved case of Noah Presgrove, a young man who lost his life in Oklahoma, I think about a year ago now, and his case is unsolved. And there's some mysterious things surrounding his death that we're going to talk about today. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about the Bryan Kohberger case. A lot of folks talk about the DNA and the touch DNA. There's quite a few different alternative theories out there when it comes to the how, as far as Bryan Kohberger's DNA could have been placed on that knife sheath. So we'll talk about those things. But lastly, before we get into the show, I want to do a special shout out to the staff there at Baptist Health in Lexington. I want to say you guys are doing a great job. Keep up the great work. All right. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's bring up the first case we're going to talk about, which is going to be Noah Presgrove. This is young man. Last year there was a party, 4-day party. He ends up going and coming back a couple of different times on 2 different occasions. And on the Sunday morning, his body is found alongside of the road. And there's been, like I said in the top of the show, some suspicious circumstances surrounding his death. One being that he was unclothed when they found his body, and he had his shoes on though. So there was I believe there was some shorts that were found folded near his body. He had some pretty significant injuries, and we're going to go through the autopsy report and kind of talk about some of the injuries and things of that nature. So viewer discretion is advised in this case, but this is Noah Presgrove. This is his father and his mother. His father is Victor, and his mother is Casey Elliott. And this is actually from the night. This is Noah Presgrove and his friend Jack, who we have an interview from him. He's been taking a lot of heat. A lot of folks have looked at him as a possible suspect, a possible person involved. He's passed the polygraph test. We'll look at why he's been suspicious, so to speak, and we'll look at why maybe perhaps he had nothing to do with it. So just kind of show you guys what's going on here. All right, so let's start off with the medical examiner report. All right, so it says here Noah Alexander Nichols. However, he also went by Presgrove. 19 years old. He is found on the highway. Now, from what I understand, and we'll also listen to the 911 calls, is that his body was partially in the roadway. I think his head was on the white line, where the shoulder is, that separates the shoulder from the roadway. So let's kind of go through this. I believe it says here there's a pedestrian, unknown as far as type of vehicle. If there was a vehicle, I believe that it has been ruled out that this was a hit and run. I think it's also been ruled out that I'm not sure if they suspect foul play either. So it's kind of weird. But we'll go through it. All right. So this is here. A descendant was found on the side of the highway on September 4th, 2023, died of multiple blunt force injuries. Okay, so multiple blunt force injuries to the head and neck, abrasions, avulsions, lacerations to the top of the head, subjacent abrasions on the lateral left eyebrow, corner of left eyebrow and left cheek, front left ear with associated lacerations to the left side of his neck. Abrasions to the right back and head behind ear, subjacent posterior right neck, broken upper lower teeth, abrasions in the middle of midline of the upper lip, and laceration to his lower lip, laceration to the left surface of his tongue, scalp and so this is a lot of doctor talk that I'm not aware of. So I'll be honest with you. I don't want to say anything that sounds weird or incorrect or mispronounce any of these things, but it sounds like he had a lot of lacerations to the to his face and to his the back of his head, skull fracture splitting down the middle of his skull. So I mean, he had, it seems, and it was kind of would be somewhat consistent with a hit and run, with a vehicle accident, just kind of what I'm looking at here. He had a fracture to the neck, C1, C2, C6, C7 as well. So brain swelling. Now, some of the things that are, are question mark as far as the possibility of a hit and run is that, well, he was at this party earlier, and I don't want to jump too far into it because I think we're going to come across the investigation part in this examination report. But he had gone to a party, and at some point in the party, he was involved in an ATV rollover earlier prior to him leaving. Apparently, he goes back to this party. He hadn't driven his truck there. He was trying to find a ride. He was trying to go to sleep in somebody's bedroom. They wouldn't allow him. So he left. He put on the two different shoes. He was wearing two different shoes. One was a Hey Dude. One was his shoe, which was an Adidas shoe. And then they found his body, a couple hours later. And so there's some suspicious stuff going on there. But he was involved in an ATV rollover with what was described as several other men. Is it possible that some of the injuries that he sustained, that we are reading here are subject to that rollover because, they didn't find any sign of a vehicle, striking somebody there. There was no pieces of vehicle. There was no, you didn't see any paint transfer on the body or anything like that. There wasn't any plastic pieces or anything like that would have been broken from the vehicle. No skid marks, none of those things anywhere along the lines. It would make somebody believe that he was struck by a vehicle at that location. And I think that's some of the issue or some of the problems that we're seeing with why they're not ruling it a hit and run at a certain point, but a lot of injuries. He also had injuries to his torso and other extremities. So let's go to the opinion aspect on this. So it says here, in consideration of the circumstances surrounding the death, autopsy, examination, and the toxicology report, the death of Noah Alexander Nichols is due to multiple blunt force injuries. A descendant was found naked, wearing only a pair of shoes on the side of the highway on the morning of September 4, 2023. There were no vehicle parts or debris observed at the scene. At this time, what transpired on how the body was found on the road, having multiple blunt force injuries, is unknown. Therefore, a manner of death is deemed undetermined. And so it is possible because so one of the things that also had occurred was that I believe it was the aunt of Mr. Presgrove, Noah Presgrove, they had opted in for an open casket, and several people who had seen, what had happened to Mr. Presgrove, they described it as a beating. It appeared that he was beaten down. Now, there's been a lot of theories that the possibility is that maybe he got into some altercation. His blood alcohol level was almost 2 times the legal limit, which they were having a 4-day party. I think it was like a holiday weekend that weekend. So Monday there wasn't any school or any of those type of things, work. So they were out drinking and partying, and sometimes alcohol mixed with, perhaps age and being, amongst other people that are drinking, some things get out of control sometimes. And I think there's a theory out there that maybe something happened to him someplace, and then he was dumped there, and maybe he was struck at some point by a vehicle, but because he was laying on the ground, that would explain why there isn't like vehicle pieces that are there and that you can see. Maybe perhaps the only thing that struck him was a tire, but I think you would see tire marks even somewhere. I mean, on the body somewhere. So I don't know. It's weird. And it could also have been that was what the anticipation was. Somebody could have, hurt this, young man, put him on the side of the road in efforts to think that might occur. Somebody could come by and swing up, and there you go. Yeah. And Truth Exposed says he's got a lot of road rash. He does have some road rash, yes. But I think the question was that it wasn't very much on his legs. And I don't think that they found any spot where it appeared that he was struck at this specific location or whatever. And his shoes, which one was a Hey Dude, was still on his foot. And he had another pair of shoes. And then his shorts, so he was completely naked, and his shorts were folded up somewhere near his body as well. So that's why there's some weird things that are coming into the situation. All right, let's continue this. It says, an autopsy was performed on the body of Noah Alexander Nichols in the office of the chief medical examiner in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma on September 5th. The descendant was a 19-year-old male who was found on the southbound side of the highway by a passing truck driver on September 4, 2023 at approximately 5:53 hours, which is 5:53 a.m. He was naked and only wearing unmatched shoes. So he was wearing both unmatched shoes. There was a pair of shorts found several feet from the descendant. It was reported to be his. Now, these shorts were white shorts, and there's some footage of him that night and pictures of him throughout that weekend. And one of the other things that's weird is he's never seen in white shorts in those pictures. All right, so it says here there were additionally there were 3 pieces of white metal chain, as well as a part of a tooth presented several feet from the descendant. Also, there was a clump of hair found with one of the lanes of the highway several feet from the descendant. See, that sounds like something was hit there. Additionally, a clump of hair was observed on the right buttocks without blood or tissue. The paved highway consisted of 2 lanes with a shoulder on both sides, speed limit of 65. The highway was poorly lit at night, and there were no vehicle parts or debris observed at the scene. Further investigation revealed that the descendant was at a house party and drinking on September 3rd, and then rode an ATV Ranger vehicle with several men and had a rollover incident. The descendant was alive following the incident and returned to the party, where he got in an argument with his girlfriend. The descendant left the house party and was not found until the morning of September 4th on the side of the highway. So some of his family have come forward, and they're not aware of a girlfriend, so they're not sure what this girlfriend thing is about. Supposedly, again, this is all speculation. I'm not sure how true of any of it is, but there was an argument that night between Noah and his friend Jack, his best friend Jack, who happened to be also one of the persons that pulled up early on the scene with his father. Apparently, there was a disagreement because he felt something about this speculation and rumor. something to the effect about that Noah may have been flirting with Jack's girlfriend or something to like that. So um, I've seen some text messages and some other things that may allude to that might be true, but I haven't verified the source of those things. All right. Subsequent scientific identification of the descendant was made by visual tag. The body was received, sealed, serial number along Oklahoma office, examiner. Just want to see what there's anything else. All right. So rigor mortis was complete. Rigor mortis was complete. Well, it depends on what time they arrived there. So that usually is about 4 or 5. Well, I guess it could happen anywhere between like 2 to 5 hours after death. Rigor, that is. Again, it varies. Some people, I've never seen personally in my law enforcement career where somebody went into rigor super early, but I've heard it's happened talking to seasoned officers and detectives. All right, so rigor mortis was complete. The pink-purple liver mortis was present posteriorly and fixed, except in areas exposed to pressure. The body received wearing only an unmatched pair of shoes. The right shoe was a Hey Dude brand with a speed lacing shoelace containing minimal debris and grass inside. The left shoe was an Adidas brand with a regular tied shoelace containing more debris and grass inside. Interesting. So there was grass in both of them. Now, he had gotten in that ATV accident. I would assume that, if he was in an ATV accident, that, yeah, you would probably get grass inside your shoe. But if he put on somebody else's shoe at some point afterwards, why would there be grass in that shoe? Now, it does say that there's more in the Adidas shoe. So it is interesting. There was no observable damage to the shoes. That's even more interesting. So he probably wasn't thrown off of something. Like, I don't think he was thrown off of the back of a truck or any of those type of things, because Hey Dudes probably would have fallen off pretty easily. So I highly doubt that was the case. But what could have led to this? And sorry about the pause, y'all. I had a cough pretty good. All right. Also received were 3 separate brown bags labeled as follows: shorts containing a pair of white printed shorts without observable damage. So if he had road rash on his body and things of that nature, and there was no damage to the shorts, they're a pair of white shorts. If they were on his body at the time of, like, if he was struck by something, and, well, I guess if he was struck by something and he just got knocked out completely out of the shorts, but you would also expect him to be not in the Hey Dudes as well. I find it hard that the shorts come off without the Hey Dudes. The Adidas could have been tied. That's one thing, but Hey Dudes aren't a pair of shoes that are like gonna stay with you like that. So that's the part that really kind of confuses me a little bit. So that, that's just an observation right there. There's the white chain, the teeth, broken in half tooth, consistent with a molar tooth, brown hair. Let's see. I'm going to try to go down a little bit of the things that aren't, there was no evidence of, where was this at? So the scalp, the eyes, pale, pupils. There was no evidence of, I don't even know how to pronounce this word. That's why I needed Blue today. He was supposed to be, he was my medical professional. Pitachie, hematoma, injuries, or lesions present. All right, so there was stubble on his face. There was no evidence of, no mass. I don't know what any of these things mean, to be honest with you guys. It just kind of sounds like, it says here there's no evidence of oral mucosa or masses in the neck or larynx. So there was no, what I'm assuming is this means that there was no sign of strangulation. The thorax was asymmetrical. The abdomen was flat. The external genitalia were those of a normal adult male. There was a drying artifact of the scrotum. The back of the extremity showed no significant deformities. There was a drawing of a black ink of a stick figure person on the side of his right thigh. Now, there was a video out there, and we'll go through some of the video that they have of that night, where people were drawing on his back and stuff. So that might not be anything of significance. There was a cluster of parallel linear scars on the posterior left arm and elbow. There were additional scars of different shapes on the rest of his extremities. There were scabs present on the right upper lip and plantar surfaces and the right thumb and right index. There were scabs and healed abrasions on the right side of the nose, back of the right of the hand, including the third, fourth, and fifth knuckles. It sounds like he got in a fight with somebody. And he's got scabs in the upper lip, scabs, all these places, and abrasions on his right hand. And that tells me he probably got in a fist fight with somebody a couple days earlier. Might be interesting to talk to whoever that person may have been. Now, there was something that these folks were doing where they were slapping each other around. And there's video of that as well. They were literally calling, I guess they called it Fight Club or something, and they slapped each other. Could that be the cause of it? Maybe. But that obviously the scabs don't happen after, death, right? So that had to have happened before this entire incident occurred. And I would have assumed before the ATV, I mean, maybe. I guess the ATV stuff could have scabbed some of those things, but I don't know why these things just kind of seem a little bit older, but maybe. So there were scabs and healed abrasions on the right side of the nose. So because it says healed abrasions on the right side of his nose, back and right of the hand, fifth knuckles. There were healed abrasions on the lower back of the left hand, including the fifth knuckle, left ankle, foot, a bunch of different places on his legs. All right. So let's see. Multiple blunt force injuries. External examination revealed a 4-inch by 2-inch braided laceration having a fish-like appearance, having drying artifact on the left frontal parietal scalp with exposure to the bone. There were subjacent abrasions on the eyebrows. All right. I mean, I really don't want to go into all the details there of the extreme injuries that he had. I just want to see if there's anything. All right. So that's basically it for that. Let's listen to the 911 call. Let me remove this real quick. I got to turn the audio on. I forgot to do that. All right, let's see.
What is your emergency?
Hey, on Highway 81, just north of Terrell, in between Terrell and Ryan, Oklahoma, it's probably about 3 miles north of Terrell. Dropping down the road, I had a bunch of cars behind me, but it looked like somebody got hit, like somebody walking down the highway laying on the shoulder of the road.
It looks like somebody's laying in the road?
Like on the shoulder, like maybe they were walking and somebody hit them. Unless it was a deer, it looked like a body.
Okay. You said, so on Highway 81,
between Ryan and Terrell, just north of Terrell, it's probably about 3 miles. It's kind of in a low spot.
Okay. And is that gonna be? I'm trying to think which way that highway runs. Is it gonna be on your east, west, north, or south? I'm trying to think. I'm sorry.
It goes north and south. It runs out of Duncan.
Okay, so what side of the road is that on?
It'd be on the west side of the road.
Okay, let me see who I have on duty to go check that out.
That's it. It looked awful odd.
911, what is your emergency?
Yes, ma'am. I was driving to work. I'm south of Terrell, or north of Terrell, south of Ryan.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure there's somebody laying dead along the road. They look naked. I'm staying back.
Okay, I just had 2 calls on that, and I have a deputy headed that way.
All right. Well, I'm sitting here blocking the road.
Oh, are you there waiting? Okay.
Because he's right. The body's laying right on a white line.
Oh, it is a body. He's naked, and he's laying on the white line. He's naked.
I turned around because I just about hit it because there's a deer run across the road, and I'm like, first I thought it was a deer, and I was talking to a guy I work with. I'm like, I don't think that's a deer.
Yeah, that's what my first caller said. Thought it was a deer, and then when he looked back and he said, "No, there's no way that's a deer."
No, and it actually looks like there's a piece of clothing maybe laying in the middle of the road. Now, I don't want to get too close. I just
Jeremy right now. No, this is another 911 call that's looking at it.
Oh, she's already been in touch with Jeremy.
Okay. Yeah, Jeremy's going to head that way.
Jeremy's heading that way. She's on the
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So you're staying there, or?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and make sure nobody runs it over or anything else. I mean,
I have a art reporting party staying there until a deputy gets there to block so nobody hits them again.
There is a reporting party is going to sit there with flashers on.
So those were the 911 calls that came in early in the morning. It sounds like one of them almost hit him. I think it sounds like almost 2 people almost hit him. And that's one of the theories. Like I said, that maybe perhaps he was dumped there in efforts to make it appear that he was struck by a vehicle. But let's go and look at a couple of videos of that night.
Introducing Sling Free Stream, TV without limit.
Well, after the after this ad, so give it a second. It's about 20 more seconds. Thanks again to everybody that's tuning in. Please hit that like and subscribe. Here after this, we'll get into the Bryan Kohberger topic as well. So this is actually during the party that weekend. This is when they're drawing on his body. This is the slapping that I was referring to. And there's other footage of other folks going back and forth with this, but this is the footage of him and at this party. So this is the party that was going on there.
This range, I will fucking.
This dude here is holding some sort of weapon now. I don't know how that looks. I mean, to me, it looks kind of bad. I don't know. You guys, he's holding a gun. Don't really seem like. I don't know. So this is Noah here on the left. I believe that's his best friend, Jack. It could be somebody else. I'm honestly not sure who that is.
You slap me. I slap you. I do trust you. I trust me. I trust him. I trust him. Hit me. Go ahead. See, I wasn't going. Oh. Music in it.
Which one?
Yeah,
we got it.
You see my wiener?
Country Pimp. 1-on-1. Mike Tyson.
So apparently, well, I don't know what that was about, but apparently there was that guy they called Mike Tyson. There was some sort of issue with his phone being lost, and maybe perhaps even an accusation that Noah had something to do with that, and there was a little issue there as well. So some interesting things to see. I'm sure and what I'm going to do later is break it down and see if I can see more things out of those videos. The guy with the gun is that one was interesting. Let's watch a few more of these real quick.
I ran over here.
This is Jack, the best friend of Noah.
I asked him if Noah was okay, and the semi-truck driver had his hands on Noah like this, and so I just kind of, and I could just tell, that he was not okay. He was laying on his side, and he just had his eyes closed, and he had a cut on his forehead. Like, it wasn't just like terrible, it was just a cut on his forehead. The top of his hair was scraped off his head, and there was blood on his ears. 100% in my heart think that he was hit. I think he got hit on the top of his head by a semi. And that shoe that was on good just stayed on. I don't know. I can't explain any of it,
Is there any part of you that believes that he might have been beaten to death?
No, he was not beaten to death.
Why not?
Because just the injuries, you just could tell he's not. I said, okay, I'll take the polygraph test. I took the polygraph test, and it was nerve-wracking, of course. I had these two things on my fingers. I had a butt pad and then my feet thing, and these things around my chest. And I didn't even get to look at the guy. I was looking straight forward, and he was talking to me, asking me questions.
There's a lot of online chatter, and I think that's the reason why they're asking for you to take a polygraph test about you and your father. Tell me about what that experience has been like for you to have to handle that type of discussion happening all around you.
I think the reason that I got brought into it is because, going through high school, you did not hear Jack's name without Noah and Noah without Jack. We were just always together. He lived with us for a while, and we were just always at each other's houses. And I think when everybody heard something happened to Noah, they just said, what about Jack? And just, I don't know. I don't know where all the crazy talk's coming from. Just sucks.
Do you feel good to kind of be past that a little bit with the polygraph test? Do you believe that you're past that or no?
People saying stuff. People are saying like it's easy to pass a polygraph and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know. You can't really control what people say about it. You just know what you know. And I've put my personal number on Facebook and said, if you want to talk about it, I'll talk about it.
So what has these last 7 months been like for you?
It's always been the hardest time of my life. And on top of other people saying everything.
So I know I've seen the comments, some folks asking about how sure he was of certain things. Apparently that morning, so that night of the party, he left at some point. And there's some speculation about what time did he leave, if he left before or after Noah left, because from the story I heard and read and everything else I can put together is Noah went out and got on the ATVs. He had a rollover accident with some folks. He gets back, takes a shower, and he wants to go home and can't find a ride home, and he takes off. Apparently he also got in some sort of argument with some lady that the medical examiner put in there was his girlfriend. Now, I don't think his family's aware they may be aware of who this person is now. However, from what I've been able to read and understand, it sounds like they weren't aware of him having a girlfriend at the time. And so he gets into some sort of argument, takes off walking. And what Jack's story is that he had left at some point in the night, and that he had some sort of plans to go fishing with his father. And while en route to the fishing spot, or whatever the case may be, he came upon the scene of the accident after law enforcement had already been there. But there's been some speculation as far as his involvement. And I think a lot of it has to do with some folks have stated he's changed his story. And so has his father a couple of times as far as, where they were supposed to meet, where they were. I think his father, there's been a couple of different things about where he was that night as well. So I don't know. I haven't dug into any of those things. I don't know the truth behind those. Just want to let you guys know that those things were out there, and that's what the speculation in those rumors that are being referred to when it comes to this interview and they're talking about. I want to say thank you to Sirius Black with her $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. We appreciate you.
Just been the hardest time of my life.
And so if you could tell there from the very beginning of that interview, Jack was one of the very first people on the scene. He tells me that he was leaving to go fishing with his dad when he drove up the road, noticed all the activity, and then saw Noah's body right here, bloodied on the side of the road.
Well, that, Alex, fantastic interview.
Yeah, remove that real quick because that's just them talking. Let's see. Now, this is an article. This is the host of the party that Noah Presgrove attended before his death speaks out and says she is cooperating with police. This exclusive. The host of the party that Noah Presgrove attended hours before his battered body was discovered beside an Oklahoma highway is speaking out to share her condolences. But otherwise, she is declining to answer specific questions to the media regarding the ongoing investigation in the teen's mysterious death of September 2023. The attorney representing Avery Howard, whose 22nd birthday bash at the home of the in Terrell, Oklahoma, was attended by dozens of teens and young adults, including 19-year-old Noah, says in this week's People Cover story that she and her extended Wilcoxon family are working with investigators. The entire Wilcoxon family mourns the tragic death of Noah Presgrove. Attorney Andrew Benedict says in a statement, the Wilcoxon family has coordinated and cooperated with the investigating law enforcement agencies completely and intend to continue such cooperation in the investigation until the investigation is concluded. One thing also I wanted to address as far as rumors go, there was some rumors that I had heard also about there was some phone work being done, and there's been rumors that phones left around the time when Noah left, and there's rumors that nobody left around the times that Noah left. So I do want to just put those two things out there before those things start jumping out as well. Let's see. Noah, a standout high school student athlete, was last seen alive by his friends in the early morning hours from before 2023 at Avery's party. Some of the attendants had been drinking and went hog hunting in an ATV side by side owned by Jack Newton, Noah's best friend. Jack tells people. So Jack is the one who's told about the ATV incident. Interesting. So Jack was a part of the. I don't. This is the first time I read that. I didn't know that Jack was a part of that ATV incident. Let's continue this. But the story got rowdier as the evening progressed, and more people began to show up. Around 3 dozen at most, according to Jack. By 2 a.m., Jack says he had gone to sleep in a bedroom in the house. But about an hour later, Noah got the keys to his ATV and went for a ride with several others. After tipping the vehicle over on its side, Noah returned to the house not long afterwards. So it was Jack's ATV he also wrecked, and there's also supposedly an argument between Noah and Jack about Jack's girlfriend that Noah was flirting with. And connecting dots. Not saying Jack's involved in any of this. He passed the polygraph test. I think that's what it said he did. But yeah. After tipping the vehicle over on its side, Noah returned to the house not long afterwards, cleaned himself up, and ended up having a disagreement with 2 young women at the party, whom Jack was told later felt he had gotten too close to them. I think one of them was, so he wanted to sleep in a bedroom, and he had asked some girl if he could sleep in that room, and she said no, because I guess he had hooked up with her friend the night before or the night before that. I'm not sure. So this continues to go on to say that made him Jack, says Jack. So this is Jack's story. Who notes that this version of events is based in part on secondhand information from others at the party. He told her, one of the women, that he was going to go cool off and just walk around and cool off. Noah was seen leaving the house and disappearing into the night at 3 a.m., Jack says. By 6:15, local authorities acting on 2 911 calls from motorists on the nearby Highway 81 found Noah's body about a mile drive from Avery's house. So the dude was out here partying until about 2, 3 in the morning, going fishing at 5. Noah was naked, and the base of his skull had been split in two. His spine was fractured, and an 8-inch head wound peeled back part of his scalp to the bone. He was lying on his side, and his knees were kind of pulled up to his chest a little, says Jack, who was heading out to go fishing when he spotted his friend's body on the side of the highway before the sunrise. Noting that Noah was right by the white line off the rural roadside. Oklahoma State Police, who are continuing to investigate the death, tell people they don't believe that the Comanche Oklahoma native was murdered, but have otherwise not publicly commented on what exactly led to his fatal blunt force injuries. Noah's family tells people that local authorities never searched the house where Avery's party was held. Well, that's concerning. They are working out with a private investigator who says they have zeroed in on some of the attendees that night that are determined to solve this tragic case. Noah's older brother, Dalen Presgrove, somebody knows something. Not going to lie, man, there's a lot of red flags in there. Like a lot of red flags. I understand, but the suspicion there. I don't know. A lot of red flags. Let's hear from the family. Let's see what they have to say from the family themselves.
It was an eye-opening experience speaking to the family of Noah Presgrove. We went into great detail about the autopsy report that's now in their hands, what they think happened to Noah, and the frustration they feel from not getting direct answers from his friends.
So blunt force trauma to the head, and your thoughts when reading that is that it's quite possible this might have been the hands of somebody else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's what's got me thinking that it wasn't no accident, you know. He'd been just beat in the head so many times that it just, you know, and it couldn't have been by a car. Just once I saw his face, it's just, I just couldn't do it. So I have no idea about the hair.
I can tell it's still so fresh in your mind.
Oh, yeah. It just won't go away, and it won't. And these kids, they've been hanging out here for the last 4 or 5 years, you know, with that boy. And it's just, you know, hard to believe that you could have friends like that and they all just stabbing you in the back. I've talked to a few myself, only the closest ones that I feel like I could, but not really getting nothing out of them. I mean, one of them I've gotten a couple stories, 2 different stories out of his mouth, you know, and another one I've gotten 3 different stories out of his mouth. So, you know, which story is true, you know. And in my heart, I just pray to God Jack has nothing to do with it, you know. I mean, because I love Jack, you know, but, you know, that was Noah's best friend. And where was he, you know? I mean, I hate to put that on him, but, you know, it keeps going through my head. They've done wrong, and they need to stand up and be a man and admit it, you know, regardless. I mean, if it was an accident, why didn't y'all just say it was and call 911? I have respect for law enforcement, but I just feel like, I just don't feel like they're doing enough right now. They're not giving us no information. They're not giving us no hope. And it would be nice to have a little hope. It's not going to go away, you know, until this is resolved. We will not stop until it's resolved. And that, you know, and I'm hoping that it will put pressure on them, you know, to let's get busy and get this figured out, you know, and I'm hoping it will. Until you come and you tell me what happened to my grandson. You can't get over it. And I don't even know if I'll get over it then, you know.
I've made repeated attempts to get in contact with detectives with the Oklahoma Highway Patrol to try to find out the latest on their investigation, but so far, during my entire time here, I have yet to hear back. Ashley?
Alex Capriel.
Some bold statements there made, and you know, especially those when it refers to some stories going back and forth whether or not, this happened or that happened one way or another. And it's just a weird situation. It's a weird situation. It's still unsolved. If anybody has any information, please contact their local authorities. If you don't trust, cops, things of that nature, and something and you want to say something some other ways, and you want to feel the need to email me, by all means, I'll make sure it gets to the right place. My email is drunkturkeyshow@gmail.com. And so Jen comes in saying, finally able to see the member only videos. If someone is watching and isn't a member, it's worth it to see all the member videos glued to the screen last. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jen. Yeah, we appreciate you. And then Heather comes in with her membership for 17 months. We will always love a Rogie. Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah, so sad case, man. Being 100% honest with you. I'd heard about it somewhat. I'd heard about it. I looked into it a little bit when it first happened. I thought there was a resolution in the case, but there absolutely isn't. It's still unsolved. And we'll continue to monitor this case. We're not going to just let it go. So we're going to continue to look into things and some of the other rumors and thoughts and theories. All right, guys. So transitioning into the Bryan Kohberger case, I had a comment in my comment section not too long ago, referencing the DNA, saying that it's touch DNA, and touch DNA can be transferred one place to another easily. And they brought up a specific instance, Lukis Anderson, this case specifically, because his DNA ended up mixed in the fingernails of a murder victim, and he ended up getting charged for this based off of the DNA, and to find out he was never even there. And so let's break it down. Let's break down that situation. Let's look at the elements around Lukis Anderson's case, and let's try to compare them with the elements around the Bryan Kohberger case. And let's see if there's actually any possibility that something similar could have happened. All right, so without further ado, let's get into it. So this is the from ABC News, says how an innocent man's DNA was found at a horrific California murder scene. So it goes on to say, Ravish Kumra, a millionaire who was well-known property owner in Monterey Sereno, California, was found murdered in his home in 2012. Police said it appeared that Kumra had died of asphyxiation during a home invasion in which his assailants gagged him with packaging tape and then made off with valuables. Forensic experts found DNA on his fingertips that they linked back to the 26-year-old Lukis Anderson. He was arrested and spent 5 months in jail. There was only one problem. Anderson had an airtight alibi. That's one, I think, maybe perhaps first thing that we're going to see that is different out of this case and maybe the Bryan Kohberger case is there isn't really an airtight alibi in Bryan Kohberger's case, but there is one for Anderson. At the time of the murder, he was in the hospital being treated for severe intoxication. So you have documentation of him being there. You probably have camera footage with timestamps. You probably have his, I think he was homeless, so I'm not sure if he had a phone on him or not. But if he did, you would have been able to have pinpointed his location to that place. Plus, you also have the level of intoxication status from the hospital. I mean, he's there for severe intoxication. They probably did some blood work on him. They probably can determine a few things from that. And this continues to say, because of his high intoxication level, he was on a 15-minute watch by the nurses and doctors, so there was no time gap when Lukis had been able to commit the homicide, said his attorney, Santa Clara County Deputy Public Defender Kaylee Goncalves. Kulik said it was later determined that the same paramedic who had been called to take away Kumra's body had also transported Anderson to the hospital, which Kulik said led to the transfer of the touch DNA. So there's a situation here that led to the transfer of the DNA. It wasn't just like floating there. You had to have Anderson and somebody who was, there had to be a connection there, right? The connection there was a paramedic. So Anderson wasn't secluded by himself in a car in the middle of nowhere. He was in a hospital. He was transported there by a paramedic, and that same paramedic ended up at the same location as the murder scene, and that's how that transfer happened. So there was a physical touching or physical transportation of between Lukis and the victim by the paramedic. I don't think that aligns here in the same situation when it comes to Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger was out there by himself. He was proclaimed to be in a park during the early morning hours, which I don't know if you guys saw this. Let's tune into this real quick.
Does his alibi make any sense? Court TV producer Cody Thomas is on the case and joining us from Washington State. Cody, there you are. Let me ask you, because it's very specific where he said he went. So my question to you is, does his alibi make any sense?
Well, Vinny, of course, it's up to the court to have a direct answer to that question. But I did go down to his favorite location, Wawai County Park. And I also went at night to just kind of get a feel of the stargazing vibe that he was going for. It was a long drive. There was a lot of dirt road, several miles of dirt road to get there. Take a look at what this park would have looked like after dark at the entrance gate.
According to Bryan Kohberger's alibi, he says during the window of time that the murders occurred, he was out driving around simply stargazing, specifically ending up right here at what he calls one of his favorite parks in his alibi, Wawai County Park. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with coming to a public park, doing what you want to do, stargazing included. That's what they're here for people's leisure in the community. But one caveat about this park in particular, it closes once the sun goes down and doesn't reopen until 7 a.m. And if you pan over here to the left, it's gated, and that gate is closed. No cars coming in, no cars coming out. So according to Bryan Kohberger's alibi, he says he was here during the window of time that the murders occurred. Now, we know those murders occurred between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Now, how is it that he could be out here at those times if this park is closed?
Yeah, so just wanted to bring that up real quick. All right, let's go back out here to this. Now, there's more to it. They weren't just looking at Lukis Anderson because his DNA was there. He had also been arrested for burglary and things of that nature. And they had other suspects as well. It wasn't just, all right, we think it was him. In fact, if you go down into it, here with the Marshall Project, they break down this entire case, which I recommend going and reading. I did so. I read this entire thing. He even thought, he was so drunk, he even thought that there was a possibility that he may have done it. Lukis Anderson, that is. In fact, that's one of the things it says. He's like, I drink a lot. He remembers telling his public defender, and he goes, he remembers telling public defender Kelly Kulik as they sat in a plain interview room at the Santa Clara County, California jail. Sometimes he blacks out, so it was impossible. So it was possible he did something he didn't remember. Maybe I did do it. Kulik shushed him, and so so on and so on. So he even thought he had done it, but there's more to just like, all right, his DNA just randomly ended up there. It wasn't like, Anderson was out and about by himself that night. There had to have been an opportunity for him to get his DNA somewhere where somebody else could have the opportunity to be in the presence or view of that crime scene. And so that was the hospital. Bryan Kohberger this situation doesn't meet that. He was by himself, alone. Now, I know somebody starred, I starred as the Gilgo Sealed Connection. It's not, we haven't heard anything else about that whole Gilgio thing or whatever, but it'll be interesting when it does come back out. But no, you're making a stretch that just because that may exist with, I think it was one of the persons who was at the scene the day of the murders, who was directing traffic / outside of the house, had nothing to do with the case, but I think he was involved with some kind of sticker stuff. Okay, but that has nothing to do with Bryan Kohberger's DNA being on the knife sheath. Now, well, anyways, back to this. So Bryan Kohberger his entire situation is completely different. He alone, he himself has said that he was alone in his car driving around by himself. So he didn't come in contact with anybody. There's no documentation that he was pulled over that night by Moscow Police Department or any other police department or any of the forensic investigators that actually went in there and collected the knife sheath. Now, if we go back and just go based off of that as well, the collection of the knife sheath, from what we understand, it was somewhat underneath the body of a victim, and that kind of helps, I guess, kind of conceal the sheath from other DNA or contamination from outside elements as well. So, for instance, when Payne writes in his in the probable cause affidavit that he goes up there and that there's the knife sheath, it's on the right side or whatever the case may be, the other guy that goes up there, he's had to be told later. Remember that? Well, the reason behind that is, one, it's a very small house. The rooms are very small, and there's a lot of DNA and a lot of big crime scene there. So you want the less amount of people in contact inside of that house as possible. So if somebody's going up and following Detective Payne up that wall, he's probably the only one actually entering into that room. I mean, up that stairway, he's the only one that's probably entering that room with the forensic, one of the forensic CSI guys. And they're probably pointing out some of these things. The other detective probably has to be told those things about the knife sheath is because he's back at the door. And I know before somebody says, well, what about the part where it says viewed from the door? It says that the knife sheath is on Mogen's right side when viewed from the door, not that the knife sheath was viewable from the door. You know what I'm saying? So that's like me telling somebody, hey, if you go and you look at my house, on the right side of my house is where you're going to find whatever, if I give you an item to go pick up. Or if I were to say, hey, if you're coming in from the back alley and you're looking at the house from the alley, it's going to be on the left side of the house, which would be the right side if you're looking at it from the front of the house. So I think it was more about positioning versus what you could actually see, and which is why the other guy had to be notified later of the sheath's position. Yay, what's up? Warning label coming in with her 3-month membership. Thank you. So knife sheath under Maddie, then on the bed by Maddie. This sounds made up. No, it's not that it's made up. It was, where was it that I'd seen that it was clarified that it was slightly underneath the body of Madison Mogen, underneath the comforter as well. Wasn't viewable from the door. It was from where you were on the right side from the door. That's where it was at. So, oh yeah. Now people say that's the other thing too. The probable cause affidavit is the bare minimum of information. So to Mogen's right side or on the right side of her body or her slightly underneath of it, it's not going to be as descriptive as I think a lot of people wanted. And Jen brings up a great point. She says, Kohberger C moved it, right, Daniel, because it changed. They must be lying. No, that's not the case. The case is the probable cause affidavit is just the bare minimum of information. It's not supposed to be everything in there. And so they're not going to give you all of the descriptive pieces. Like, for instance, in the Richard Allen case, we know that those girls were killed by a sharp object and that they were staged and moved and things like that. However, I myself and Blue and some of the folks here have seen the crime scene photos there. They're not as descriptive in the PCA of Richard Allen's PCA or in any PCA that I've ever seen is going to be as descriptive as a lot of people are anticipating it should be in the Bryan Kohberger probable cause affidavit. It's not going to be that way. The fact that it's 19 pages long and still the bare minimum should tell you that it's quite a bit of it's most likely there's quite a bit of evidence against him. And it's no surprise when we hear like 51 terabytes and things like that. It sounds like there's a lot of evidence against this guy. But yeah, no, just because the probable cause affidavit says that it was to Mogen's right side, it doesn't have to be extremely specific, like, and say underneath the comforter and located above the sheet. And it was this and that slightly tilted. That's for court. That's for trial. You know, the probable cause affidavit, you have to remember what the purpose of that document is. The purpose of that document is not to show everything that law enforcement has. It's just to give a judge enough information to say, hey, there's enough to arrest and charge this man and hold him till we go to court, or until bail hearing at least. And then they can decide if they're going to be bail and such. So there we go. Does anyone know if they ever released the latent shoe print size? I don't know if they ever did, but the fact that they noted that his shoe size was 13 in his deal there, yeah, it could be something. You know, they could have just said they picked up a couple pair of shoes, this, that, and a third, but they specifically added the size of the shoes. So that's a good question, though. Great question. So right now, I'm not looking too hard into the live chat. So every now and then I'll take a glance and something will catch my eye. So don't get offended if I don't see your question and I don't see it. At the end of the show, I'll ask, you know, everybody for their questions, and I'll put a couple of stars there, and it'll help me see some things. Help me see it, and I can answer some of those. All righty. So yeah, I went through all this. I went through all this stuff here about the ins and the outs of this investigation when it came to Lukis Anderson. And I just feel that it's just way too different of a case. Like there's nothing the same. Now, Bryan Kohberger was, you know, at a doctor's office that night, or went to the hospital, or did any of those type of things, or was just, or even went into town and was amongst other people, you know, and maybe perhaps if he is innocent, we have to remember he's been wearing gloves and all those other things. You know, if his alibi was like, or if his story was, hey, you know, I went to Moscow, I was at the corner club, or I ate at the grub truck at, you know, at some point, you know, that night or the day before, or whatever the case may be, maybe perhaps there's something there, but he was by himself that night, you know, and again, maybe he was. I mean, all we know is from 2:40 something on in the morning, right? So we don't know what he was doing beforehand, but I would assume that if he could have some sort of explanation for that DNA, I'm sure we would have. We'll be hearing about it, but it don't sound like it. Not at least from everything that they've argued. You know, thus far the arguments have always been, you know, IgG and how they got him. You know, that they're upset that they found him a certain way, not necessarily that that's not his DNA. You know, I'm not necessarily sure that they thought that was his DNA, or have argued that that's not Bryan Kohberger's DNA on that sheath. I think they argued how it got there. Now, I know somebody put on there something to the effect, and I read it earlier, the Giglio thing, or Gilgio thing, or whatever it's called. Well, here's the thing. If an MPD officer, Moscow police officer, planted Bryan Kohberger's DNA, let's break down the possibility of that, right? Because there's more than just answering the question of how Bryan Kohberger's DNA got there. It's like, all right, it got there. How did it get there? Who put it there? When did they put it there? How did they put it there? And so on. So let's try to answer those things to make it make sense. So who collected the knife sheath? Now, we know that Detective Payne saw it, but his other detective that went up there didn't. So we probably assume that it was probably collected by the Idaho State crime scene investigators, which there are some pictures of them there at the scene day one. All right, so they collected it. We already saw in the probable cause that Idaho State Lab is the one that discovered the DNA, and then took that DNA sequence and entered it into CODIS, which came back as a no hit. So the DNA would have had to have been swapped in before the Idaho State forensic team got their paws on it, right? In order for this to fly, because once they find it, you know, why does anybody in the Idaho State crime lab care about a corrupt Moscow police officer, small town? Nobody's going to care about that dude. Well, anyways, so they have to have put that DNA before then, which means these officers were just driving around with Bryan Kohberger's DNA. And why put it on the sheath and not like on the fingernails or on the hair and the hand? And why use touch DNA if you're going to be doing this? Why not use something more concrete? And why not put it on the bodies of the victims? Put on the knife sheath. That's an interesting tactic. And then it's also like, why Bryan Kohberger? Like, how did they even know who he was? Like how did Moscow Police Department know who Bryan Kohberger was? Bryan Kohberger's issues were with WSU. Pullman Police Department was the department that he applied for. Those were the guys that were looking into his history and looking into his background, not Moscow. So how would they even know who he was? And why would they target him? I mean, there's so many other, suspects. Like, you have a whole database of people that you've arrested throughout, however long you've had that database open of people you've arrested, including you have Bryan Kohberger, who attempted to kill allegedly his roommates, ended up getting in a shootout with SWAT. And there's a big old, conspiracy about SWAT taking his life. That they may have done something wrong in that situation. Why not blame him, especially if you ended up taking his life in a manner that wasn't completely legal or right? And that way you can kind of sweep that under the rug too. Sweep everything under the rug. He can't come back and argue for himself. The mere fact that they don't blame him tells you, remember, his phone was swiped and cleaned and cleared and all these other things. So it's not like, somebody could say, hey, there's this on November 13th. It couldn't have been him. The mere fact that they didn't blame that guy tells you that they didn't just find a fall guy. There's also the dude that lived like 4 blocks away who attempted to stab his wife and himself. He got arrested. He was a convicted murderer. I think he killed one of his friends. He'd only served like a couple of years. It was weird. We talked about it on the show. That guy, no. That guy's not good for this. Bryan Kohberger, the PhD student from WSU, that's your fall guy. Everybody's going to believe that. And like I said, when did they plan it to be Bryan Kohberger, and when did they grab his DNA? Shoot, they couldn't get his DNA when they were looking for it. They had to end up, settling in for his dad's DNA. Remember that? They couldn't even get his, but yet somehow, some way, on this night by himself in a park that's closed off, while he's secluded, no one else around him, in a complete opposite direction as Moscow, his small trace amount of DNA that is not mixed with anybody else's finds its way on a knife sheath. You got to ask yourself, how does that happen? It's single source. If Bryan Kohberger were to have touched something like a doorknob, and then somebody else would have had to have touched the doorknob for that DNA to transfer on their hand, right? Well, it's missing that other person's DNA from that doorknob to doorknob transfer. I know somebody can say, well, what if he like brushed up against something or someone? Okay, so if he brushed up against something or someone, whatever that person is brushed up against, and it's probably being pressed against somebody as well. Like, for instance, do you think you would find my DNA on my t-shirt? Probably. I'm wearing it. If somebody bumped into me, you're probably going to see my DNA on them as much as their DNA is on me. And even if they transfer DNA to like the sleeve of my shirt, well, the sleeve of my shirt is still in contact with my arm. So my DNA should be there as well. So unless he accidentally shook hands with somebody wearing gloves, when it's weird because he's the one that wears the gloves, but maybe he shook hands with somebody else that wears gloves, and that's how they got his DNA there. Now remember, it's only his, and the assailant is wearing gloves. Well, what about the steering wheel? So let's think about this. So if the assailant, puts on the gloves before he goes out and drives and touches a steering wheel that they touch, or the shift knob that you touch multiple times a day, or any of those things inside of the inside of that vehicle, don't you think that would lead you to believe that you would end up tracing that DNA onto the gloves, thus transferring it onto the knife sheath? I mean, it's possible. Maybe that's how it happened. It's very plausible if he was driving around. Could you imagine that's what he did? He was driving around in his car touching things, and he just so happened to touch the knife sheath and unbutton the button, and that was just enough to get his DNA from a transfer from his car into it. But if that ended up not happening, right? If he didn't put his hands on, if he thought to himself, man, if I put my gloves on inside my car and I drive, I'm gonna find DNA, whether it's on the door panel, on the steering wheel, on the shift knob, on the turn signal, on the thing to turn the lights on. I don't know how it is in an Elantra. If it's a knob, if it's a switch to power off the radio, any of those things. So the likelihood is that he put on those gloves when he got out of that vehicle, right? So that way he wouldn't transfer any of the DNA that he had from inside of that vehicle onto his person going in. Probably also put on the jumpsuit at that point as well, right? So where does Bryan Kohberger's DNA come into play here? How does it get there? If he's taking, if these precautions are being taken, is it floating around there as he's walking into the house? Remember, it's brass, so I know a lot of folks kind of clinged in onto the fact that brass degrades DNA quicker, which I guess is true. And if that's true, that means that it couldn't have been on there very long. Bryan Kohberger's DNA, that is. So while he's out and about wearing gloves, secluded by himself in the middle of nowhere, his DNA somehow ends up by itself on the knife sheath underneath the body of a victim. It's a stretch to say that it was put there by any other means other than the fact that he touched it. Now, is it possible that he touched the knife sheath at one point and somebody else picked it up after he touched it? Sure. That person that picked it up would also have to match Bryan Kohberger's height and weight, drive the same vehicle without the front license plate. And, next is the question, is he lucky or is it planned that this person committed the crime while Bryan Kohberger's phone was not connected to the network? Did this person know Bryan Kohberger's schedule that way? I mean, this story is it's not even believable. But all right, let's continue it. So let's just say that this guy knew Bryan Kohberger's story. Well, then he'd also have to have a connection to these other victims. So he'd have to have a connection to Bryan Kohberger and a connection to the victims. Wouldn't that be a connection? And so when Bryan Kohberger's attorney says there's no connection between Bryan Kohberger and the victims, it sounds like they're also dousing water on the possibility that somebody knew the victims and Bryan Kohberger and was willing to, was familiar with them enough to frame Bryan Kohberger for their murders. That's kind of what it sounds like to me. That's the way I take it, at least. But so, in other words, I understand that things can happen, and I think that if maybe perhaps Bryan Kohberger wasn't the type of guy who was, seen walking around with the latex gloves and things like that, if it wasn't so difficult to grab his DNA, and if it wasn't, his DNA, I think that maybe perhaps there's a chance that, or a higher chance it could have gotten there some other means, and also if it was a mixture of DNA, I think that would have really increased or put some doubt into the evidence. But single sourced under the body of a victim inside of a knife sheath, there's no other DNA behind or anywhere else from the assailant. I don't know. All right, guys, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, let me know. Put it in the comment section, please. True Crime Editor, they got the right guy. I agree with you 100%. Just kind of let you know that's where I'm at and that's where I'm starting from. All right, what if they drove over to WSU and broke into his office, grabbed a pen and added the DNA in the sheath? The cops are mean, right? But yeah, but then again, like, all right, let's just say they did that. When did they do that, and why did they decide to do that? Why did they decide, all right, let's not arrest the real killer. Let's go for Bryan Kohberger. All right. And I know you're being sarcastic. I just want to go with this because somebody honestly probably would come up with this excuse that they would do this. All right. So I think the biggest thing that people say is that the University of Idaho wanted somebody to be arrested. You know, the semester was going to start, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So when did they decide that enough was enough? That they needed to arrest somebody? And if it wasn't immediately, you know, when did they, if they decided to do this after that sheath was collected by the Idaho State Lab, you know, did they just get lucky that the DNA that they found on the knife sheath just so happened to match Kohberger's? Like, because hold on, I'm going ahead of myself. So if the Idaho State Lab goes and collects this and turns the DNA into evidence, and that's done within a week, and you guys are or the theory is that the semester was coming to an end 6-7 weeks later, so they decided to frame anybody. Did they just get lucky that they decided to just frame anybody and that person's DNA matched? Or did they go in there, like you said, steal his DNA? I don't know how they would have changed it in CODIS, but somehow changed it in CODIS, a national database that had Bryan Kohberger's DNA already entered into it. I don't get it. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. It's make believe. And this is when I tell people when people tell me that I don't have an open mind, I say I do have an open mind. It's just there's nothing that makes sense, and I'm not willing to make believe to have an open mind. You know, I'm open for somebody to say something or show something that proves something differently. But thus far, there hasn't been anything at all. And, you know, it's always the same crap. They framed him, they framed him, they framed him. And it doesn't make any sense. You can deduce it with just a little bit of logic that nobody framed him. Like it's almost impossible for somebody to have framed him. It is impossible for somebody to have framed him. You know, it is. So to go back in time, to put DNA there, to break into a national database or into an evidence room, get on a computer and break into a national database like CODIS and swap out the DNA so that it matches Bryan Kohberger is just, if you believe that, God, I think that this world has come to a crazy point in life. Let's see. Yeah, I agree with you on this one. Agree with you there. And you know what's funny too? Like the other comment that I see a lot is that, oh man, I can't wait till Kohberger gets out and sues you guys. Please try it. Please come sue me. I'd appreciate it if you did, because if Bryan Kohberger got found or not guilty or was acquitted or mistrial, he's gonna get the crap sued out of him by the families, and it's gonna be like OJ. How many people did OJ sue? Did OJ die with a lot of money? Didn't he go back to jail because he had to go steal his own memorabilia because he didn't have any money because everybody kept suing the shit out of him? Like, come on now. Let's think about this logically. You know, just because somebody says in a criminal investigation that you're not guilty, the burden of proof is very different in a civil court. In fact, it's a lot less. It's a 50-50. Is it more than likely that you do this? So if Bryan Kohberger wanted to sue anybody, he'd have to go and testify and prove basically he was innocent and that these people were fabricating or saying things that were wrong or lies or yada, 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 yada. You know, it's not about, oh yeah, hey, I was found innocent in the court of my peers. Okay, good. The burden of proof for a criminal trial was proof beyond reasonable doubt. That's not the case in a civil court. So if he were to try to sue anybody, anyone, and they go in there and they say, nah, dude, you more than likely committed this crime, that's going to open the door for a hell of a lot more people to come and sue him that are related to the families, the victims. And so, yeah, this dude ain't getting anything. This fairy tale that some of you guys think that Bryan Kohberger is going to somehow be acquitted, sue everybody, and then marry you is probably not going to happen. can tell you that from a mile away. Yeah, she said something to that effect. I don't know. Daniel, your interview with the death investigator, your interview said that the opposite. She said it was been a porous object. It would have degraded faster enough to snap. Could have been. I'm just talking about the fact that it has been set out there, and it deals more with brass, like casings for ammunition, than it does with brass, metal surfaces. But I don't know. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to those that say that it does degrade quicker. It's true. And that interview is only available for members only. So if you want to see my interview with the medical forensic death investigator, which she talked quite a bit about the possibility of cleaning up a crime scene and not showing evidence of cleaning up the crime scene, especially if you know what you're doing. Did he borrow his phone 12 times for a drive-by? True. Now, I know a lot of people are looking at the most recent document where they said that the PCA doesn't say that. That's true. I think a lot of people are taking that out of context. First and foremost, the last document that was dropped by the prosecution was a argument saying that they don't want a change of venue. The defense's argument is that the prosecution has let out a lot of information out there, whether true or not, that is impartial against Bryan Kohberger. And basically the prosecution is saying, no, we're not. We've laid out just the bare minimum of information that was required for his arrest. And it's in the public document, which is a probable cause affidavit. Now, it does specify that he was connected to a tower 12 times that belonged to the residents. Now, you and I can allude that that's probably means that that's what it is, that he's stalking the victims, but it's not necessarily what it is saying. It is saying that he connected to the tower. Now, remember, the probable cause affidavit isn't the end-all be-all of information or evidence. It is the burden of proof is not beyond reasonable doubt for probable cause. It's just more than likely. And it's also the bare minimum of information. And so we also have to remember that they didn't have access to Bryan Kohberger's phone at the time of the writing of the probable cause affidavit because he had not yet been arrested. So at that time, all they had were the phone pings, which weren't as accurate as the GPS data that's on his phone or the stuff that they've gotten from the warrants from his phone since then. Example, Strava app. We've all seen the warrant for that app on its own, and there's been others for multitudes of phone companies, AT&T, and this, that, and a third. Well, anyways, at the time of his arrest, they were putting out there that, yeah, they believe more than likely that he could have been, following the victims or doing things, because I think they even allude to the fact that in their experience that a person will, either turn off their phone or leave their phone behind to elude the investigation, but maybe perhaps wouldn't do so in the months leading up to the incident as far as planning goes. And that's where it references the 12 times. So it does reference it. It doesn't necessarily say it, but it does reference that. And I think that's what they were saying. It's like, we put that out there, but we are not necessarily saying that that is the case. They're not also not necessarily saying that that is not the case. It is not the time to discuss those things. And that isn't the document to discuss it either. That document, the PCA, is irrelevant at this point. And what that means is, like, for instance, it was relevant for the probable cause of his arrest, for the bare minimum of his arrest. The bare minimum doesn't fly no more. Now you need beyond reasonable doubt. So those phone pings aren't as valuable as, for instance, GPS locations. Bryan Kohberger's dad's DNA being found and tested to be 99.9% the father of the suspect who committed the crime isn't as valuable as Bryan Kohberger's DNA that was swabbed after his arrest. There's a lot of things that were found and either discovered or confirmed some of the things that they are putting into their case, and we'll get the end product when trial comes. I mean, that's just the way things are here. So with that being said, they got this guy, but take that for all that it is. Florence White comes in with a $9.99 super chat. Thank you so much. We appreciate that. Thank you. All right, Crossroads Accounting and Tax. What is with the language about the codependent in so many court documents? So the codependent thing, I think that's just a boilerplate plate or whatever it's called, a thing that coverall, because it talks about codependent and what was it? It was codependence and informants and a bunch of other things that it listed out. It wasn't just a codependent, but what it's all referencing to is the informants, which are the people that are related to Bryan Kohberger that were used to build the tree that pointed towards Bryan Kohberger for the IGG. Those are the defendants or the conspirators or whatever the case may be. Now, there's rumors that there's one more, an informant. And I think that in Howard Bloom's article, he mentions that, and also in his book, that grand jury had mentioned some things, and that the Goncalves family got close to a possible informant. I've not asked them if that's true. They've not told me if that's true or false, and I'm not going to ask them if any of that is true or false. I don't want to. I'm not going to put myself in a weird position if they did talk to grand jury. And I don't want to put them in any weird positions either. So I don't know about that, but according to Howard Bloom, he said something to the effect that they got close to somebody who they were told to stand down, and that person that they were told to stand down from had called in through the tip line. And because they called in through the tip line, they had afforded some anonymous rules, I guess you can say, that privileged them of being, not contacted by anybody. So I don't know. I don't know what that was all about. The only person that I know that's in the probable cause affidavit that made contact, I believe, with the tip line is the DoorDasher. I think it said that the self-identified through the tip line. I'll look it up again. I'll pull it up before I make the wrong statement. But I'm pretty sure it said something to that effect about the tip line, and that's how they had self-identified themselves in the Bryan Kohberger case. But I'll pull it up just to make sure. I don't want to be wrong or inaccurate. All right, righty. So let's go. Where does it say about the DoorDash delivery? All right. Law enforcement identified the DoorDash delivery who reported this information. So this DoorDasher reported this information. Doesn't say by the tip line, but they're the ones that reported it. So I'm assuming they could have reported it through the tip line. That's the only thing that I can think of they could have called law enforcement. They could have done a bunch of different things, but the only reason that they're aware of the DoorDash delivery is because the DoorDasher reported the information. So if they reported the information, where did they report it to? And how did they report it? Is it possible that this was a report from the tip line? Maybe. It's the only thing that I can kind of think of. Let's see. And I don't think this person would be a co-defendant as much as maybe an informant, maybe. And the only reason I say that is it possible the DoorDasher saw the white car at one point, maybe even saw the person driving the vehicle, but just didn't know who that person was or recognize that person until after the arrest of Bryan Kohberger? Now, obviously, this came in before the arrest of Bryan Kohberger because the PCA was written before his arrest. I would have assumed that if she did see or he see, I'm not sure the gender of the person of the DoorDasher, but I assume if he or she did see Bryan Kohberger and identified them by photo lineup, that would be here. That would have been that's my assumption. I would assume that it would have been there, but I don't think so. Let's see. Anybody else got any questions? No, I went all the way to the bottom and I saw I was just about to open one. All right, here it is. Do we know if there was any other DNA on the knife sheath? I'm sure there was a victim's DNAs on the knife sheath, but from what I understand is inside the button where this DNA was collected, it was a single source. And so Bryan Kohberger is the one that's here on trial. I'm not sure if they would list, the victims' names on there as well and say, oh yeah, alongside Bryan Kohberger's DNA on the back part of it was also Kaylee's and Maddie's DNA. I'm not sure how that would be pertinent to this specific part of the probable cause affidavit, which we have to remember, bare minimums. So you don't want to put more information than you have to. You don't want to give up your case to your defendant, especially in this case. And I'm not saying like specifically this case, I'm talking about a murder trial, and one that you're probably going to have to go to court for. You're not going to want to give up, valuable information until it's appropriate as far as how you plan on using evidence against this person, right? It's one thing to turn in evidence, right, and say, hey, here's this 5-hour video, and another thing to add on the 5-hour video that at minute 2 hours and 13 seconds, you see this, and this, and then this, that, and a third. If you put it in the probable cause affidavit, you're probably going to be breaking it down as to what about that piece of evidence you're going to use and how you use it. Those are things that you don't need to specify to the defense. You just got to give them the evidence. They're not privileged to how you plan on trying your case, so to speak. So that's why you put as minimum of information as possible. You don't want, the defense to know how your plan of attack is, and they can come in with some fabricated stuff. And, who knows? All right. If you read the DOJ motion to protect it, it clearly lays out the IGG being only a tip, and the prosecution of the IGG is an informant. Yeah, I agree. Let's see. Brian, they have classmates. Don't forget, they did discuss the class in class with Brian. Well, it was discussed in class. Brian wasn't there. Doesn't sound like he was a part of those conversations. What is the likelihood of recovering touch DNA at a super bloody scene? We don't know the sheath was covered with blood or not, but if there was, it was amazing. It was found. Well, it was face down, right? So let's kind of picture some things, right? So the sheath was face down, and it's made out of leather. Leather's typically waterproof and things like that. So if blood got on it or whatnot, it was probably covered in blood on the top. The only location that they probably could have pulled DNA from without it being mixed or contaminated with the victim's blood is probably from inside that button sheath that was face down, on a mattress, protected by the leather sheath casing around it, and what was crazy is if you found DNA there, you probably found more DNA elsewhere. But if it's mixed with the victim's blood, is that going to be as impactful if you found single source? And if you're doing the bare minimum for a case, right, and you're doing a bare minimum for a probable cause affidavit, you're only going to list the single source DNA on that knife sheath. Are you going to list, there was other touch DNA on the backside, but it was mixed with Kaylee or Maddie's blood? It's probably going to be there. We're probably going to hear about it if that's the case, but it's not going to make its way to the PCA because under the bare minimum aspect of what we need, all we need to know is that there was Bryan Kohberger's single source DNA there that wasn't mixed with anybody else's. And this was a spot in the sheath where we could find out later is the only spot that didn't have where it couldn't have been. So that probably tells you that his DNA was elsewhere on that sheath too. It's kind of like the latent footprint too. A lot of people get that confused. A lot of people think that there was just one latent footprint. There was no other prints. That's not the case. The probable cause affidavit doesn't say that. Probable cause affidavit is actually referring to, or it's actually trying to corroborate what Dylan Mortenson said, saying that the killer left facing towards the backsliding glass door. For a footprint to become latent, it first has to be somewhat visible, right? And the more steps you take, the more latent it becomes. So if you saw a latent footprint facing a certain direction, that tells you that it was left there. It was one of the more recent footprints to be left, meaning that it was the last print to be left at the scene, meaning that it was the way out. If it was covered in blood and you had other prints that were latent, the ones that are covered in blood, you would be able to deduce that they head in that direction before heading in the other direction and where the latent footprints are going, because the latent footprints would be left after those bloodier ones. And so by being able to deduce that there was a latent footprint facing that direction tells everybody that that was one of the last steps that the killer took, and it's facing the glass doors. So that's why they know he's leaving that direction. Remember, bare minimums. They don't have to put out there, the house was riddled with 340 prints. They just wanted to make sure that they had, all right, this person saw somebody at 4 o'clock or at 4, whatever, leaving in this certain direction. Is there any proof that they left in that direction? Well, here's the latent footprint that goes that direction. So we're going to probably find out a lot about this trail and how it works. And it's probably going to end up telling us a lot of information as far as confirmation of who was first or which room was hit first and so on. But yeah, just because we're getting the bare minimum, remember. Now, we can deduce some things, though, knowing that such DNA was what was used. That tells me that they didn't find Bryan Kohberger's sweat, blood, or hair, because those things would have been used in this case. Now, had they found that, let's just say they found a hair or a clump of skin cells underneath the fingernails of a victim, that would be in here. I don't think that the DNA on the sheath would be in here. Now, the DNA on the sheath will be in trial. They're going to try to connect those two. But to try to put Bryan Kohberger in the house or with the victims, all they would need would be the DNA on the fingernails or wherever it was. So that's another explanation that I can come up with, is this is probably the strongest evidence they have of DNA against him. It may not be the only evidence of DNA they have against him, but it's the strongest because it's in here. Had it been, there been stronger ones to prove that it was him, that one's probably in there. And this one's probably not. Just like if there was a mixture of DNA on the back of the sheath, it could be there. It's just not going to make its way on the bare minimum report that is the PCA. Hope that all makes sense. Trying to explain everything as I go. All right, let's see. We can do this for another few minutes. Most DD drivers that work those hours have a dash cam. That'd be great. That would be great. That would be great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Daniel, don't forget the video from the Seattle death medical investigator lady. You interviewed this BS about the snap allowing for degradation. That isn't true per interview. She said it helped. Yeah, she said it did, the smoothness, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think the temperature does, which it was cold, so that would help also. There's a lot of factors that go into it that would definitely prolong the degradation time when DNA takes. True story. All right. So Jason says, I am here. The sheath was planted. Well, here's the thing. It was planted with Bryan Kohberger's DNA. By whom and why Bryan Kohberger? I mean, you answer the question of how his DNA may have gotten there, but it's missing a lot of other questions that can be logically deduced and logically explained. So who, what, when, where, and why comes down to it. And you can't just answer one of the questions and say, hey, that question is here when there's absolutely no proof of it. There's no evidence of it whatsoever. And even if, let's just say they found Bryan Kohberger's DNA and they planted the sheath with his DNA, why are they going to wait 7 weeks before they arrest his ass? And why are they going to wait for him to leave? Why not? Why not just be like, all right, our investigation led to this vehicle, before anybody questioned law enforcement or anything about their ability or inability to, complete the crime or solve the case. Why not do it then? Oh, hey, our investigation led to this guy. The stuff that they got out for him, his arrest warrant, there wasn't anything special in there. They didn't find the murder weapon or anything that led to him. In fact, once they got his name, It was what his phone activity and the fact that he was a criminal justice student and he had a Reddit survey and a bunch of other things that are open and public. They could have gotten that at any point. Why wait 7 weeks? Why not arrest him sooner and make themselves look even more competent and more confident in their case? Sheath was not planning, my man. That one is probably the most ridiculous, no offense, but that's a ridiculous thing that the Sheath was planted. And then if you think that it was planted like after the fact, like when after the fact? And how did they get Bryan Kohberger's DNA then? Couldn't even get his DNA when they were trying to get it in Pennsylvania. They had to get his dad's DNA. But yet they got his DNA then. It just doesn't make any sense. Respect you, my man, but it don't make sense. Did Jack D take a lie detector test? I think he did. I got to go back through my messages, but I'm pretty sure he did. I think he took a lie detector test. I think he took more than one, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'm pretty sure he did. I want to say Christy and Steve told me that he took a lie detector test, but I'll ask him again. They're the ones that told me anything that I need to know about that situation. So, pretty sure he did. I want to say he did. The frame theory just doesn't make sense to me because of the state, and you was all about money. They could have just framed Brent Kopak and would have gotten to spend 10. Exactly. Oh my gosh, this is probably one of the best comments today. They're going to spend $10 million so they can save their city. You're right. You're absolutely right. It doesn't make any sense. The money aspect don't make sense. I heard somebody say something about that they killed the victims, some investment thing for the property. Well, that sure did work out fine, right? They're getting a lot of money out of this property. They had to donate it. The school didn't want it. They're losing property and money on it. They had to destroy it because they were losing money on keeping an eye on it and a bunch of other things. Yeah. This financial aspect that people are looking for has to have a financial means behind it. You can't just say, oh, it's about the money and say, well, they lost a lot of money and there's more money than they would have if they not killed anybody. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't make any sense. It just don't make sense. Like some of these theories, and again, I'm open-minded to something that makes sense, but if it's the same stuff over and over again about money, it's the University of Idaho, it was taking too long. How can you explain the DNA in CODIS? How did they change that? You can't. Unless now this is like some weird Bryan Kohberger is like the born identity, and I don't know. Too many movies. I don't know. All right, tell me, Daniel, how did he hide the belt with the sheets came off? Surely he had a belt. Well, he had those Dicky jumpsuits that they found a tag for and the receipt for in his residence that's on his apartment. I think it's his apartment's search warrant. You don't have belt loops in those, my man. You don't get belt loops in those. It's unfortunate. Well, it's fortunate for us and the victims in this entire case that you don't, because I think that's the whole purpose and reason behind why he left the knife sheath behind. Dicky jumpsuits don't have belt loops. Plus, also, thirdly, those things are uncomfortable to drive with. And if he had it on his person, like on a belt loop, and it's just kind of jabbing him and it's moving around, there's a good chance he could somehow get his DNA on it. Whether it's like it scratches through the material or whatever, I don't know. If coming in contact with his body in that manner, surely you'd probably seem to think maybe perhaps he gets some more DNA on it. I don't know, but he left it behind. I mean, are the police gonna be like, all right, let's put this sheath here and then wait 2 months, let half the country believe that we don't know what we're doing, have a victim's father talk about us in a matter like we're incompetent, and then all of a sudden just arrest him and be like, all right, we did it now. It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. Touch DNA found. I never brought it up. Huge cover up. Again, when was the DNA found? The DNA was found when Idaho State investigators collected the DNA. They collected the sheath and took it back to the lab. So at what point did they put Bryan Kohberger's DNA on that sheath? What point did they plant it? They would have are you saying that the cops murdered these girls and then planted the sheath with Bryan Kohberger's DNA? Do you really believe that? You think that's a really plausible thing? And then not only is that plausible, do you think that the FBI, Idaho State Police, all these other law enforcement agencies that are looking into this case are going to be like, yo, we're gonna protect this corrupt cop and go after this future cop that could be very good. I mean, he's a PhD dude. Let's go screw that guy up and protect the corrupt city cop from Moscow, Idaho. Let's put all our careers in the line so that we can allow this to happen. I'm telling you, my man, you can logically deduce everything that has been put up there thus far, unless Bryan Kohberger had a secret twin brother that we're not aware of, which the defense has used. In one of their documents, they put up there that they wanted to know which other possible Bryan Kohberger relatives that match his DNA that could have been in that area on the 13th. It could have been a secret brother he didn't know he had. Because remember, he only tested to the father and then came back as a father. So whatever. Let's see. I heard people say, why only one shoe? Laugh out loud. I came to the conclusion that these folks have stepped in dog. No, I'm not going to be mean. DNA was found on the female side of the snap of the inside of the snap, single source DNA. Yeah. When it comes to the reports that there was no DNA in his car, does that mean his and his father's DNA wasn't in there as well? Now, I'm not sure. That would be odd though, right? If there was absolutely no DNA in the car. Absolutely none. After a long drive with dad. I mean, that would explain, or not explain, but that would corroborate with the reports that he was cleaning his car meticulously after he arrived in Pennsylvania, inside and out. I think they found Q-tips and some other things. I think the rumor was it was Q-tipping certain parts of the car. I don't know. It's crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. At the end of the day, it appears like evidence of trying to cover up a crime is evidence, right? Like if we find out that his phone was on during the time of the crimes, but it was in like some kind of dark bag, like he was trying to conceal his location. We find out there's bleach completely inside of that car. Because remember, they said there was a lack of DNA in the car, not a total lack of DNA in the car, not that there was no DNA in the car, not that there wasn't any bleach or any of those things that were found in it, just the total lack of DNA in the car. And so, they find bleach and they find his phone was tampered with. All these things, the place he drove to right afterwards, and the long drive to elude the investigation. Those are all, evidence of concealment is evidence against the crime as well. So just kind of throwing that out there as well. Let's see. I'm assuming they could have hard evidence against him that they haven't released. There's tons of evidence they haven't released, everything after his arrest. And the only thing that we know about after his arrest was that there was, we know that there was a Strava app that they got a warrant for that had his GPS locations. We know that there was a Dickies receipt and tag found. We know that Bryan Kohberger's DNA matched the DNA on the sheath. It didn't have to go through his dad anymore after his arrest. So this is just some of the things. We know that they have his phone in several towers and things of that nature. Howard Bloom talks about him being suspected of breaking into the chem lab to steal some things. I heard he broke into the lab as well, prior to talking with Mr. Bloom. But I had no idea it was anything in reference to him saying that it was referencing to building a bomb. I heard it was cleaning stuff, but here or there. So Jason goes, guess the first time in history a Titch DNA in a murder case was found on a sheath. I just don't buy it. Well, it's not just that, my man. It's also, well, Dylan saw somebody that matches Bryan Kohberger's description. That person was driving a vehicle that matches Bryan Kohberger's vehicle, down to the front license plate missing. And during this time, Bryan Kohberger has zero alibi. I mean, it'd be one thing if it was just the DNA. If it's just the DNA, then sure, 100%. Yeah, question everything. But the thing is, there's more than just the DNA. The DNA is just one piece. You know, I keep seeing people saying things don't add up, and it's because you're not looking at all the numbers. If you look at all the numbers, it adds up pretty easily, you know. But when I'm saying, just for an example, 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 5 is 30, and I'm getting back something like, no, because 10 plus 5 is 15, and you're not looking at the other 10 or the other 5. In this case, you're not looking at the car. You're not looking at the description. You're not looking at his phone being off at the same time. You know, the fact that his alibi is complete crap. I mean, all of those things, you know, it's not just one aspect. And I think when you look at everything, it adds up pretty easily. But I get it. You know, some people need more than others. You know, 2 plus 2 is always going to be 4. For me, I can do that in my head. Some people need to write out the problem, and some people need to count their fingers. You know, some people need more information. In this situation here, I can tell based on the information's there that this SOB did this. No doubt in my mind, based on the information we have. Some people need a little bit more information. Some people want to see all the evidence and go to court. It's great. Some people want to have all the evidence, go to court, then have everything explained to them one piece at a time before they understand how the pieces fit. That's fine too. You know, everybody's at a different point. For me, I don't need all that to see that this guy did it. This guy clearly did this. 100%. No doubt. Let's see. All right. So because old universities have a dossier, KM students, so university knew all about him to set him. So the university set him up. Why him though? Is it because he's not from there? Like 80% of the students that go to those schools, they're not from there. Like you're just throwing things out there and hoping something sticks like mud. There's nothing saying that any university were like, all right, we know who he is, so let's screw him up. And remember, he didn't attend the University of Idaho either. Attended WSU. Yeah, a lot of people, everything over here. I mean, police even had officers in University of Idaho campuses talking to people, going through and scrutinizing everybody out there through highly investigated purposes and means. They were like, oh no, we're not finding anything on anybody else over here. You know, somebody we've had a problem with that we can get rid of. Let's go look over there and randomly find Bryan Kohberger. Again, dude, just because something, you can throw something on the wall, it's not going to stick. And that's one of them. DNA on brass studies have shown that the shell casings and doorknobs had everything to do with the UV effect on the degradation of DNA. So like if it was exposed to light, I'm assuming like if it was, you know, those type of things. I'm not a forensic scientist or any of those type of things. So I don't know. And I don't want to say that I'm an expert or give an opinion on something. I truly don't know. But what I will say is that it was there and they found it. And it was enough to say that Bryan Kohberger's DNA was that by what, 5 octillion to 1. Some pretty crazy odds, say so myself. Maybe I got transferred through one of contacts with the students. Okay, but where's the student's DNA then? I mean, if it transferred to a student, you know, the student would have to have had contact with the DNA as well to transfer it onto the sheath. You know, it's not like, all right, Bryan Kohberger touched the student's book and then it magically hopped from the book to the sheath. It would then have to be contacted by the person that committed this crime and then contacted to the sheath. Where's that person's DNA? Now, in the Lukis Anderson situation, why didn't they find the paramedic's DNA? Because he was wearing gloves. So I think it was Bryan Kohberger who's the one that's been seen wearing gloves, not anybody else. 1 and 2. if somebody had their gloves when they made contact with Bryan Kohberger, are they not touching anything in their car after making contact with Kohberger before they get to the house while they have their gloves on? Like, I mean, none of that makes sense, because as soon as they get in the car and they start touching things like their steering wheel, their doorknob, their handle, the shift knob, AC, the stereo, all these things that you commonly touch, you're going to start pulling your DNA on there. So if the person had gloves on and they didn't get their DNA, and the only DNA they got in there was Bryan Kohberger's, that tells you they probably put those gloves on when they got there. So what they do? They, like, was Bryan Kohberger's DNA suspended in the air outside of that house, and this guy just kind of like whisked into it with the knife sheath open, and the DNA just whisked onto it? We will know. It's easy to prove if that's the case. In the Lucas Anderson case, there's a common person there, and it's easy to determine how his DNA got there. There's this step 1, 2, 3. Bryan Kohberger doesn't fit any of those situations. He was by himself, reportedly from his own team. You know, he's the one saying he was by himself, that he wasn't out and about meeting people or any of those things. And if we're to believe that this DNA transferred from one person to another person to another person, from one place to another place, because it takes a person to transfer it. This isn't like pollen that blows in the wind. All right. You know, you physically have to touch something and then smear it and touch it somewhere else. It had to go from one thing or one item to another to another. And it gets onto the knife sheath by itself. And not to mention, all right, it'd be one thing if it was the DNA, but you also have a description of a person that matches Bryan Kohberger's description. Rather be vague, it doesn't exclude him. And yet you also have his phone being off at the time of the incident. You have a car seen around there with a front license plate off as well. Not to mention the things that we haven't, seen in court yet, which are like the possibility of the purchase of the knife sheath itself. The knife and the knife sheath, I mean. And those things still exist, and those things are going to come up in court. Regardless if you want to believe them or not now, those things exist and those things are going to happen. You can disagree now and say, oh, well, we don't know that. We don't know that. And when it comes out to be true, you're just going to look bad. But you've been disagreeing this whole time when everybody else has been able to clearly see that 2 + 2 is 4 in this situation. They didn't need to see all that other stuff to determine that this guy did this. It's not just the DNA, guys. DNA is just the cherry on the top. It's the thing that puts him in the house, but it's not the only thing that implicates him into this murder or the murders. You can focus on one thing or focus on another thing and kind of cover one eye and look at things with one eye closed and say, oh, this looks kind of shady, and not answer all the other questions or look at it from a real perspective. It's not going to change the facts that this guy did this. And there is absolutely nothing that anybody has come forward that has been reasonable that explains all the pieces of evidence that we know that implicates somebody else other than Bryan Kohberger. Even his own alibi is trash. Well, I appreciate everybody. I want to say thank you all for coming out and tuning in on this weekend. We'll be back probably on Wednesday. You might see me another day this week, maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure. I know I have a Steelers thing I'm doing tomorrow. I do need to do a members only this week sometime. So if you're not a member, I would encourage you to consider becoming a member. We'll be doing a members only live show at some point this week. But from right now till for the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing a show on Wednesday, then probably a show on the weekend, whether it be Saturday or Sunday. And then I want to say in a month, things are going to get shifted up again. My work schedule is getting kind of crazy. And so I'm definitely going to do 2 to 3 shows a week, but you're going to have to stay tuned to see which days that those shows are going to be on. So make sure you like, subscribe, ring that notification bell. And if you disagree with me, let me know in the comment section why you disagree with me. And if you keep it, what's the word I'm looking for? Civil, and not try to you utilize insults and things of that nature, I'll let you keep your comment. I'll have a conversation with you about it if I see it. I only see a handful of them. I'm pretty busy, to be 110% honest with you. I have a different, I do other jobs other than YouTube. YouTube's the bottom job. Like, I have important jobs I do. I'm sorry. And so, I don't go in there and read every single comment all the time. So I apologize for those that think I do. I don't. And if those think that I'm ignoring you, I'm not. I probably just didn't see it. I do try to get in there. I do try to read every one of them, but I honestly don't get to all of them. I probably get to maybe half, but I will try my best to get to them. Please let them know in the comment section. Again, if you're civil about it, I'll have a conversation with you. If you're not, then you probably won't be in the comment section no more. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later. Peace.